So we've got a short story collection on our hands. And how do we review short stories? No, really, I'm asking. I have done this before and I still don't know the best way to do it. Hi, my name is Sarah Freshly and welcome to Freshly Read Books. Okay, so short story collections. Bit tough to review because there's a lot of stories in them. Hi, Sarah from like 5 minutes later, realizing that I didn't say what video this is, like what book I'm reviewing. This is about Cursed Bunny, which is a short story collection by Bora Chung and translated from Korean by Anton Hurr. It's like I've never reviewed a book before. So I think how I'm gonna do this is to just talk about a couple different stories, two that were like my favorites of the bunch, and one that I think does a great job of like setting the tone of the collection and is just like a good way to talk about it as a whole, but just talking about one story, if that makes sense. So that one specifically is going to be the first story in the collection called The Head, which actually in the original publication was the second story. But I think that I like that it was the first story in this one because I feel like it really just, boom, gets you in the right headspace for what this short story collection is going to be like, because it immediately starts with somebody about to flush their toilet, and then there's a head that pops out and it says mother. Just reminds me of that book, Are You My Mother? But instead she's like coming out of a toilet. So I really feel like this story immediately like it hits you in the face and is like, buckle up, things are about to get weird. In fact, I ended up messaging Kieran right after I read this, and this was months ago before it was on the long list. I read this back in January, hoping that it would be on the long list, which yay, go me. But I sent a message to Kieran being like, whoa, Cursed Bunny's weird. And I sent him a picture of the first page where it was like, the head pops out of the toilet. So this head in the toilet is basically made up of these like things from the protagonist that she has like thrown away or excreted, to say it delicately. So essentially made up of like poop and hair and like toenail clippings or something. And while initially the head looks a little bit like misshapen, although it never like looks like the things that it is technically made of, it does look a bit misshapen at the beginning, and then it kind of continues to grow and form itself to look more and more like the protagonist herself. And this toilet person basically like asks the protagonist, please continue to give me stuff so that I can continue to like grow into a full person. And the protagonist is like, whoa, no thank you, like did not ask for this, why is this happening? And basically just tries to ignore this toilet person. The protagonist eventually ends up having her own child the traditional way, by giving birth to it instead of it being made of things in the toilet. And this child she loves and cares for deeply, all while ignoring the person in the toilet and being, I guess, more standoffish and rude to that person. This story felt like it could be about a person that has a child outside of marriage that maybe she did not want to have, and then ends up later marrying and having a child that she cares more for. So like the first child she's maybe doing like the bare minimum for, and the second she's like really putting her all into. And it's strange because you almost start to empathize with like the toilet person, because you're like, she's not asking for much, she just, you know, wants the stuff you're basically throwing away. But it's kind of funny because like the protagonist says, like she never asked for this. She didn't want this like child to exist, this toilet person to exist. And the toilet person doesn't seem like she really asked to be here either. But this is the situation, this is the reality, and it's kind of sad almost to see that their relationship like isn't better. This is all very weird to say considering like this person lives in the toilet for almost the whole story, but it does seem very much like this story of women who didn't want to be where they are, didn't want to have the responsibilities that they have, but were kind of pushed into these roles that were externally assigned to them. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this story was because I feel like it gets across how weird the stories can be, but also one of the very main messages of the collection in general, which is a lot about societal pressures on women. And while it takes this kind of strange avenue sometimes to get to this message, and sometimes it's even like a grotesque way of getting to the message, I do think that these stories do a good job of bringing in a new perspective and like a very different type of analogy on some issues and also still showing like the gray area that exists within them. So the second story I want to talk about is called Embodiment, which was one of my favorites from the collection. The translation of the title of this one is a little bit unique because I guess the term that is the title in Korean, its literal translation would be like to body, which could also mean to menstruate, which is a large part of this story. So Anton Hurr does provide like a little explanation of that when the story is starting, so that you do know that it has that like connotation as well. So this story is about a woman who has irregular periods, and so she ends up going on birth control, but this has a side effect where she actually gets pregnant even though she's a virgin. So she of course like talks to the doctors about this, and they tell her that she needs to find a father for this child, otherwise it's not going to develop properly and it's not going to be like a fully healthy child. So once again, in the second story, by the way, this is, I don't think I said, this is the second story in the collection, at least in this printing of it, we have a woman who did not ask for a child, but is faced with the reality that she is going to have one. So she ends up being faced with people that look down on her for having a child that doesn't have a father, for being like this loose woman. And even her family like get upset at her, not for being pregnant, but for not trying hard enough to find a father for the child so that it's born as a healthy baby. And it's not like she's not trying, she definitely is. It's just like they're annoyed at her for not trying more, which seems crazy. She ends up going on these matchmaking dates, but it always feels like she's coming at this point from a disadvantage because she's got like this extra baggage that's a part of her. She's pregnant with a child and she's looking for a father immediately, somebody who is like ready to step into that role. And at the same time, she's trying to like make good decisions and not just pick somebody based off of her very limited timeline. The most frustrating part of this story is the way that everybody else looks at her, because you just want to shake them and be like, she didn't ask for this and she's doing the best she can under the circumstances. Plus there's this idea that like any man that would swoop in would be like saving her, whereas she can't really rise above this person that's supposed to be pitied, even though she's been forced into a situation and is doing what she can to make it a positive one. The last story I want to talk about is called Scars, which is the 7th story in the collection, and I think my favorite of all of them. This one is about a boy in a cave who is regularly fed upon by this monster. He doesn't know like why he's in the cave, but he does remember being young and being dragged by men into this cave, and now he's like chained up here. He is eventually able to escape this, and he makes it to this nearby village where he is then taken advantage of by an old man that seems to be helping him out initially, but really wants to use him to enter into fights and to make money off of him. I'd say when the boy escapes, he's no longer a boy, he's like a young man at that point. He fully grows up in the cave. So reading the story is incredibly sad because you're watching this boy or this young man that gets the courage to try to escape the situation that he's in, just to end up in a very similar situation, being reliant on somebody else that mistreats him and feeds off of him in a different way. And you want the boy to escape again, but like, where would he go? How would things be different? So to me, this story is, I guess, representative of somebody growing up in an abusive household that doesn't really have resources after leaving that household. And oftentimes these people can wind up in similar situations later in their life. When the boy escapes, he is still bound by what he grew up with. He still literally has chains on his wrists and ankles. And it's just, they're waiting there for somebody else to take them and him to be trapped in another situation. He is just covered in these scars and has zero chance, zero resources given to him to give him the opportunity to heal before needing to fend for himself. I was honestly surprised by how much a short story could like have an effect on me, but this one really did. Overall, you can probably tell that I did really like this short story collection, which I will say I am already at a predisposition to I love short story collections. So I'm really excited there's 3 on the list this year, and I was really happy to have read this one. But yeah, I feel like it's pretty clear Would the Booker Frog and I recommend this book. And yes, absolutely. Especially if you like short story collections, especially if you like weird stories, then I think that you'd really love this one. Specifically, if you read The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, I think that if you liked that one, you'll also like this one. It's not quite as grotesque or gory as The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, but it is in that same realm, I would say. Similarly, if you've read this one and haven't read The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, consider checking it out. Unless the gore in this one was like, you know, right at your limit, then don't read The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, because that'll be past it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Also, are there other short story collections that I should be reading that are similar to this one, like outside of Booker, that I just haven't heard of? I would love to check out more that are like this. So let me know. Otherwise, let me know what you thought of this book if you've read it already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.